Mr. Jonathan Barrett and Mr. Mark Humphrey from Beca.
Yes, Q.
Another microphone hooked up in the meantime. Do you mind if I swear you at the same time? Do you have any preference for being sworn on the Bible or affirmed? Swear? Affirmed. Okay, I'll do one time. Could place your word on the Bible for me. Do you swear by Almighty God that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you very much. Do you solemnly, sincerely, truly declare and affirm that the evidence you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Barrett, if I can address you firstly.
Yep.
Your name is Jonathan Barrett.
Yes.
And you are an Associate Director, Structural Engineering of Beca.
Yes.
And Mr. Humphrey, your name is Mark Humphrey, and you are a structural engineer employed by Beca Carter.
Yes.
Okay. And as I understand it, Mr. Barrett, you will speak to the report, the Beca report, and if it's necessary to refer to Mr. Humphrey for any questions of detail as to the inspection, inspections that we're concerned with, we can do that. But you, as the providing the oversight and the reports, Mr. Barrett, you will speak to those.
Yes.
Okay. Can I perhaps start with just asking you about your qualifications, Mr. Barrett? You have a Masters of Engineering of Honours, and you are a member of IPENS.
That's correct.
And you have the CPENG qualification.
Yes.
And I think you've got over 16 years experience.
That's correct.
And as I said before, the inspection of this building that we're dealing with was done by Mr. Humphrey on the days of the inspection, but under your oversight and your checking of the report and the calculations subsequently.
Yes, I reviewed the reports.
Okay. Just wanted to ask you what instructions you received from the owners or via the owners in relation to the inspections.
Initially, we were asked to undertake damage inspections of the property.
Right. And so, when you say damage inspections, just to assess what damage had been inflicted by the September earthquake.
Yes.
And were you asked for any to consider the issues of safety or not?
Not to my knowledge, no. The request was verbal. It didn't come to me directly, but the request was to check out the damage at a series of buildings that Colliers, as property managers, managed, and this was one of them.
All right. And so was this what we heard this morning, not from Colliers but from someone from Harcourts, that they had a standard policy, it seemed, that they would get Homes, in that case, Homes Consulting Group, to check over the buildings that they managed following the September earthquake. So was that a similar arrangement?
I don't think there was an arrangement before September 4, but after September 4, following that, we did a lot of Colliers properties, yes.
Okay. And these properties, in particular this one that we're concerned with, were tenanted with various businesses?
Yes.
Okay. So on the, I think there was a visual inspection which was termed a level 2 rapid assessment of 143 Chilham Street on the 7th of September.
Yes.
And I think again on the 10th of September following a series of aftershocks.
Yes.
On the 15th of September, a visual inspection undertaken of 625 Colombo Street.
Yes.
And the result of that, the Level 2 Rapid Assessment form that you've produced, that was forwarded to the council, or I think via the Civil Defence?
Yes.
And you would have heard a moment ago, that's the one that council don't have a record of, but I think your letter says it was hand-delivered, I think, does it?
Yes, and as Mr McCarthy said, there were a great number of these. We were in the practice of putting them all in an out tray, all of the completed Level 2 assessment forms. We would then send those, hand-deliver those to Civil Defence, and they were then doing the placarding on the buildings.
Now, I think following that, was Beca then engaged by the owner, Best Little Law House Limited, to undertake a more thorough survey of the building damage?
That's correct.
And I think too, to complete a preliminary assessment at least of the lateral load capacity of the building.
Yes.
And to include proposed or recommended remedial works.
Correct.
And did that result in a report that you've produced to the Commission, a substantial report dated 10 December 2010?
Yes.
Were you asked to do any kind of inspection following the Boxing Day aftershock?
Yes, we were.
And was that via Colliers?
Again, via Colliers.
Right. And I think that was 25 January of this year. Did that change the assessments that have been made in that detailed report?
No, it didn't change the overall assessment, but we did recommend some immediate work to secure a parapet.
Right. Was that a parapet on the Churm Street frontage?
Yes.
Of 143?
Yes.
And that securing work was done?
Yes.
And how did that fare, that parapet, in the 22 February earthquake, do you know?
It appears to have fared well.
So the restraining of that parapet seems to have worked?
It seems to have, yes.
Okay. And I think following the 22 February earthquake, Beca were requested to undertake further inspections?
Yes.
And structural damage reports of what had happened in the February earthquake?
Visual damage assessment, yes.
Right. Has all of that building now been demolished?
I believe 617 has been demolished, along with
The ones to the north?
625 to 629, I believe, to the north. As I understand it, 143 Churm Street is still standing.
Right. Apart from what's in your report, was there any verbal advice given to the owners, either direct or via Colliers, in relation to the structural integrity of the building? This is prior to February I'm talking about.
No, the verbal advice that came after the report was issued, which is detailed in our letter response, was with regard to the subsequent check following the Boxing Day earthquake, and related to the parapet
Right.
and Churm Street.
Okay. So the advice, apart from that parapet issue, is really what's contained in the report?
Yes.
I just wanted to ask you to comment on the standard or the test you applied when carrying out the inspections that led to that 10 December report, and in particular, what account, if any, you took of the fact that it was in an aftershock zone following September?
Yes, we were briefed and aware that we were expecting aftershocks, a series of diminished shaking and increasing duration, longer periods between aftershocks. That was what was typically expected by us all, by the profession, and that was the advice we were giving. And so the damage assessments that we undertook and the recommendations that we gave, that the building did not pose an immediate risk, were in that, to that standard, within that knowledge that we were expecting aftershocks, but diminished shaking to a lesser extent on the building, and and certainly we were not expecting the unprecedented shaking that we saw on the 22nd of February.
Okay. And where did the information that you were basing that on come from?
It came from
briefings or what?
Yeah, it came from a number of briefings internally, as well as I believe at Civil Defence, although I didn't attend any at Civil Defence myself. And also there were various bulletins being emailed around the profession from GNS.
Okay. Now, you would have heard me referring Mr McCarthy to an answer to a question that was posed to you in a letter from myself, and perhaps incorrectly stated the question in terms of reference to your report, but in your report you determined that the building had a lateral load capacity of 11% new building standard, correct?
Yes.
And the question, which I'll correct now because I want to ask you it again, the question is, how does that correlate with the conclusion in the, I think it's in the executive summary of your report, where you said the buildings do not pose an immediate risk to their occupants, however repairs will be required to the damaged walls and to prevent further collapse of the masonry parapets. Okay. How does what's the correlation between the two? Or is one inconsistent with the other, I suppose I'm asking?
No, I think we need to view them both together. However, they are separate. When we look at the damage, we're looking for damage that may cause an immediate risk. So those initial rapid assessments were done on that basis, and we drew that conclusion that the damage didn't present an immediate risk. The buildings did not pose an immediate risk to their occupants. We went on to recommend repair works. We also did the IEP assessment, which came out with a building score of 11%, which again confirmed what we had already suspected, that it was an earthquake-prone building. Now, to put that in context, I suppose 11% for a very old unreinforced masonry building is not unusual. That would be a typical score for a building of that age, of that material. So
And are you talking even, say, at any time before the September earthquake?
Yeah, right. That's right. I mean, we made the determination that the damage that was apparent after our inspections following the September 4 earthquake had not significantly changed the building's performance and its immediate resilience. We obviously monitored that, and in subsequent aftershocks we re-inspected, but the score was the score before the earthquake. You know, the level of lateral load resistance in that building hadn't really changed from before the earthquake.
How do you know that it hadn't changed if you hadn't assessed it before the earthquake?
Our assessment was based on the configuration and the material type and the building age. That's it. As Mr. Smith had described it, as a broad brush tool. So those inputs to that procedure would have been the same inputs that we'd have used prior to September. We'd have come out with a similar score. Right. The damage wasn't deemed to be, in our opinion, the damage that we were observing hadn't significantly changed the building's stability.